Hi, I'm Jo Kane. Welcome to One on One. This week I have Chris Doig, a man that makes things happen. He's charismatic, he's fun. Some people would say bloody mindless. Is that true, Chris?
Well, the bloody minded bit is. I'm not sure about all the rest of the stuff. I've been blessed, really. I've had a lifetime working in things that I'm passionate about, that are hobbies of mine. So, and a few benighted fools have decided to pay me to do that. So I've been very lucky.
Oh, you've been very lucky. Well, let's get the bogey out of the room today. Chris has terminal cancer, bowel cancer, one of New Zealand's second biggest killers. How are we going with this at the moment, Chris?
Well, look, I was given 12 months to live in November, and we're now 8 months into that process, and I said to my oncologist the other day, have a good look at me, do I look like a dying man? And he had to admit that, you know, given the amount of weight I'm still carrying and my general well-being, that I'm coping pretty well. I'm realistic that, you know, there's the sword of Damocles is sort of hanging over my head, and I'm doing whatever they require of me in terms of treatment with chemo and radiation. And to be honest, the hard stuff is the treatment. It is much worse than the disease. But, you know, you have to do that to give yourself the best shot for as long a life as you can. And I'm up and down with the treatment, but in the main, my health is pretty good.
Are there some messages here for men about their warrant of fitness, about signs and looking after themselves?
Yeah, it's not just men. This is not just a male disease. I mean, it affects both men and women. 100 New Zealanders every month die of bowel cancer, and we don't know too much about that. And it's eminently treatable, but you have to get it early. And really what it says is that if we have regular colonoscopies post 50, we've got a much better chance of survival. Certainly, had I done that, I wouldn't be dying. They would have found it early enough for me to have been appropriately treated before the cancer had leapt the fence and, you know, permeated right through my body. But, you know, unfortunately, that's not the case. I was late. But others that I know who've gone and had...
Tell us about your brothers. What happened with your brothers?
Yes, well, John, who's a doctor, had been having regular colonoscopies, so he was fine. My other two brothers went and had colonoscopies. Both of them had precancerous polyps. So as a consequence of that, they've had those operated out, which is, you know, gives them a very good chance of not developing bowel cancer, but they're going to regularly monitor themselves. I've heard of countless people who've continued to do that, which is very sensible. And you know, I had very few symptoms. It's not something where you can actually sit around and wait to discover whether you've got bowel cancer growing, because I had minor cramps in the stomach. That was all, and they lasted about 30 seconds after breakfast generally, and were eminently sort of missable for us blokes who generally hate doctors and hate doing anything like that. And it was fortunate that I was actually away on a fishing trip with my three brothers, whom we're very close. And John, whom you know, the oldest one, who's a doctor, said to me, "What's happening to you?" When I was cramping up, he said, "Go and get it sorted." And as a consequence of that, going to the doctors, they said, "You need a colonoscopy." And I was 60-something, 61, and it was too late.
I'm really pleased looking at you. I told Chris that he was my #1 on our Silver Fox Club. We have a Silver Fox Club in Canterbury about people whose hair goes grey early, and you're my #1, and you still look fantastic. So let's go through some of the really amazing things that you have done and still will do. I noticed that you have just been made a companion of the New Zealand for Art and Sport. So you balance the two. What is your real passion?
Oh, I think it's very hard to differentiate between them, really. I think growing up, I was a sportsman who then discovered through Christchurch Boys High School and the music teacher we had there that I had a singing voice. I resented that initially. I didn't want to be a singer.
I can imagine it at Christchurch Boys.
Yeah, I mean, I was, you know, the first cricket 11 and first hockey 11, and sport was everything. And I wanted I would have loved to have been good enough to go on and play sport for New Zealand. I wasn't good enough. You know, it just happened that I had a talent as an opera singer. And my singing teacher said to me after about 30 seconds of the very first, you know, lesson that I had, if you do what I tell you, this is going to change your life. Now, I was about 15 or 16, and you just ignore that. But he was absolutely right. I mean, singing has been the defining thing in my life. And the thing that I was best at, the thing that took me around the world, but I never shed my passion for sport.
So you won the New Zealand 1970 Mobile Song Quest.
Mobile Song Quest,
and that took you off overseas. So can we talk about this, the principal tenor at the Vienna State Opera? How did you get there?
Well, the 1972 Mobile Song Quest was a catalyst for me. I was a young school teacher at Auckland Grammar School at that stage. I was singing still reluctantly. I was playing hockey for Auckland. I was playing senior cricket in Auckland. That was still my life, and I had this other preoccupation, which was singing. And then the winning of the Mobile Song Quest told me I had to take this seriously. And some of the other competitors who were on the plane back to Auckland after the final and after my win made some disparaging comments about my winning it and what a waste of money, because I was, you know, we'd just bought a new house and, you know, I was never going to be a serious singer anyway, and I thought, oh, bugger you, I'll go overseas and study singing. So we did. I went to Vienna because I'd done German in my university degree and had a passion for German lieder. So we went off there, and I had no intention of being a singer. I didn't think I was good enough. I loved teaching, I loved playing sport, I loved New Zealand, but I felt an onus to go and give it a go. And I studied for 2 years. I went as a baritone, and the Vienna Academy people said, you're not a baritone, you're a tenor. Mm-hmm. You know, you're prepared to retrain as a tenor. And I said, well, you know, why not? So as long as it doesn't require major surgery, I'll give it a go. Mm. So I did, and then had quite a bit of success in international competitions as a tenor. And about a week before I was due to return home to pick up my job again at Auckland Grammar School, the Vienna State Opera rang me. They'd heard about me, and they said, we'd like to hear you sing. So I went and auditioned for them, completely relaxed, because I couldn't have cared less whether they liked me or not. And they offered me a job, which I didn't accept. I then said, no, look, I'm going back to New Zealand. I've got a teaching career over there. I want to get back into my sport. And they said, well, look, we'll keep the job open. And I taught for one period back in New Zealand, and then decided, looking around the staff room, that this wasn't going to be me. And, you know, at the age of 50, I needed to go and get this out of my system. So I did. I resigned from Auckland Grammar School. John Graham, the headmaster, gave me 2 years leave of absence, and I went back overseas and took up a job with the Vienna State Opera.
Right, we're going to be right back after this break to find out what is his favourite opera. Welcome back, where I have a true Cantabrian and Chris Doig. Chris, so you were over there singing. What sort of operas? You know, what sort of operas were you singing? Well,
in the Vienna State Opera, we sang everything. I sang 40 roles in the first couple of years, I think. And they were smallish roles up to bigger roles. And they ranged from German opera through Italian opera right into Russian opera. In fact, there was classic. I mean, I didn't speak Russian, of course, and I was singing the role of the idiot in Boris Godunov, and I spat out the Russian that I thought was adequate, but the bloke who was listening to me was a real Russian, and he could barely contain himself, you know, trying to sing his line, listening to the Russian that I was spitting at him. So, yeah. So we sang everything, but I guess my voice developed into the heavier tenor range, and so I became a specialist in the Wagner, what is called the Helden tenor range, which is the dramatic tenor range. So
you've probably met some amazing opera singers. Who are your favourite? Who have you met that stood out?
My favourite singer, period, is Domingo. Mm-hmm. greatest voice that I've listened to and sung with is Pavarotti.
Yes.
Pavarotti has the most beautiful instrument, but he's not the artist, in my view, that Domingo. Domingo is a complete package, wonderful dramatically, brilliant musician, and a superb voice. So they stand out. I mean, there are other... I studied with a famous tenor by the name of Anton del Malta, and he was a Mozart tenor with the Vienna State Opera, and just a beautiful, beautiful voice. Fritz Wunderlich, there are others that were just phenomenal, but we stood on the stage all the time with great, great singers. Nielsen,
Wow.
because the Vienna State Opera is like Wimbledon or wherever. It's the pinnacle, you know, the pinnacle place in the world. And so it was a great privilege.
So then somehow you come back to New Zealand, where you have had an amazing array of roles. You ended up as Chief Executive of New Zealand Cricket, New Zealand Arts Council, including Director of the New Zealand Arts Festival, New Zealand Rowing Director, New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, Spark, to name a few. So I guess the easy way to ask the question is, what did you enjoy out of that mix the most?
Well, I enjoyed them all. I think the New Zealand International Festival of the Arts was the most rewarding, and New Zealand cricket, I have to say. The New Zealand International Festival was broken when I took it over. It had successive deficits, and the Wellington City Council was considering not continuing to fund it. And Sir David Beattie was the chairman, headhunted me for the role. I was at that stage director of the Arts Centre here in Christchurch, which was the role that I gave up singing for to come back home for. And they took me to Wellington, and I had no idea, very naively, just how badly the finances were, but we set about resurrecting it, and after 2 very successful festivals, left them with $1 million in the bank, and we went big, which I'm very proud of. We could have shrunk it, but we decided not to do that. We decided to take it, you know, by the scruff of the neck and make it the big event that it is now. It's without question the preeminent arts festival in Australasia. And, you know, my team and I played a part in positioning it at that point, so it was very exciting.
What do you think about your style or your way of heading or the leadership that you show that is a winner, that you've been, that you yourself, what is the magic about Chris Doig that seems to, where people say, you make things happen?
Look, there's no magic in it. I mean, I think it's liking people.
Yeah.
I'm very definitely a people's person. I have... and I relish problems. Every organisation that I've taken over has actually been in disarray in some way, and
yes.
I quite enjoy looking at it and saying, well, you know, this is... People say this is impossible, as I was told that the New Zealand Festival in Wellington was an impossible task. You can never make it profitable. And I said, well, that's wrong. You know, we can. And so I really quite like the challenge of doing what other people see as the impossible, but that's only... You can't do it yourself. You surround yourself with good people whom you like, who are desperate to work with you and for you, and then I think you can make big changes. And I have a personal philosophy that if you can dream it, you can do it. You can do
it. Is that what happened when you were with New Zealand Cricket? I mean, you picked it up at a time that it was not, didn't have a good profile and was struggling?
No, I mean, New Zealand Cricket was an interesting one. I was headhunted for that. I was back full-time singing at that stage, Joe.
It just doesn't make sense, does it? Shut up the singing and the...
Well, I'd gone back to... I needed to make some money, to be honest,
yes.
because, you know, as an arts administrator in New Zealand, you don't earn much money, and whilst I loved those jobs, I'd been rediscovered by the Australian Opera because, you know, I'd helped create Canterbury Opera here and was back singing. And they found out I was here. They started offering me work and then offered me, you know, very substantial contracts to go and sing over there. So my wife and I had gone to live in Sydney, basically. The phone rang and I was asked whether I'd be interested in becoming the CEO of New Zealand Cricket. I honestly thought somebody was taking the mickey. I did. I thought, you're joking. You know, I didn't think anyone would contemplate, you know, sort of a very rare beast like me doing that. But I went... Ian Taylor was the gentleman, he from Sheffield, and he flew over to Sydney and interviewed me, and we had a tortuous interview for about 4 hours. We were living in Manly, and I can remember getting on the Manly ferry and going back home after the interview, and every sort of time that the motor churned, I was thinking, I want to do this job. You know, I was desperate to do it. And I can remember getting home and I rang Ian on his cell phone and said, look, I might have buggered that interview up. I have no idea. But you need to know I would die to do this job, because I was never good enough to play for New Zealand. But the thought of running a sport at the top level internationally was just an opportunity that I couldn't resist. So, and I was very lucky they picked me. Do
you like where New Zealand cricket is at the moment?
I'm slightly apprehensive about it. We made some big changes. New Zealand cricket, as you rightly pointed out, was in deep trouble in late '95 when I took over. And we transformed it again because we had a great team and we picked very good people to come and work along that vision, and we set it up, and then Martin Snedden succeeded me and did a fantastic job. And I'm good personal friends with Justin Vaughan, and I, you know, like him personally, but I think the international cricket world's struggling, and we are struggling with that. But I'm thrilled with the dual appointments of John Wright and John Buchanan, you know, close to the team. John Buchanan will bring a great deal of cricket intellect into New Zealand cricket, and I'm optimistic about the future. But they've had some tough times in the last few years.
They sure have. And we'll be right back after this break. And welcome back. Chris, you live in Sumner. How's that community going with what's happened in September and February?
It's devastated, Joe. The hill suburbs have been very badly affected. We're fortunate. We have a lovely old 100-year-old wooden villa on the flat in Sumner, and the old girl has rocked with the quakes, tossed the chimney, but we've escaped pretty well unscathed. So we've been the hub where family members have, you know, come down from the hills and come to stay with us to get a bit of comfort.
It's tough looking at the city that you've been brought up in and love. Can I ask you, have you thought about what can happen with the arts and culture in Canterbury and Christchurch at the moment?
Well, look, it worries me because the venues have disappeared. There is no town hall. There's no Isaac Theatre Royal at the moment. The James Hay's gone. So we don't, you know, we've got the CBS Arena, which is a 7,000 seated auditorium. We've got the Aurora Centre, and that's about it. So it's extraordinarily difficult for the performing arts organisations to exist. Creative New Zealand have been fantastic. They've appointed a senior advisor to the arts who's working with these groups to try and find alternative venues for them. And some of the groups, I think, have shown enormous fortitude and lateral thinking. The Court Theatre preeminently amongst those who've gone off and found old warehouses and are building their spaces in them. And I admire Philip Aldridge and the Court, Felicity and the others there enormously for getting off their backsides and doing that. CBS Arena has been modified to accommodate the NZSO recently by shrinking it, putting a sound shell in there, and it worked adequately. So we have to
I know that you said adequately.
Well, it was better than we anticipated. And I've just had a meeting with had lunch with the senior arts advisor, and he tells me they're looking at trying to coordinate all of the arts activities in the city and having a trail or a river of arts activity to try and cement them, bring them together. And we need to do that. There are no excuses for not performing. We've just got to think, you know, outside of the square about where and how.
The other part is, if it's not crazy enough for this opera singer that went into cricket and to rowing, and that you are now on the New Zealand Rugby Board, and of course we've got a World Cup here. How are you feeling about?
Well, it's just, you know, I saw the job advertised. Well, in fact, my brother saw the job advertised in the paper and said, "Why don't you apply for it?" And I did. You know, almost tongue in cheek, and they've appointed me, and I absolutely love it, and am blessed that it's, you know, that. Whilst I'm likely to be only a one-termer given my health environment, it coincides with the Rugby World Cup. So, you know, I'm going to be very lucky to get to see most of those games, and I'm enormously proud to be associated with an outstanding organisation.
Because people like myself might think that it's usually such a closed shop, and I'd look at your background and going, well, he sung and has that creative, and now they're going to put him down with a the old wintergreen and the bandages down in the dressing room.
I did ask the question the other day at a strategic planning session whether my being an opera singer was the first step. You know, I was the token woman on the board. You know, that we might actually we might be bold enough down the track to feminise the place a little bit and bring a good woman on. And I think that will be the next step. So the opera singer was the first step. Maybe a woman will be the next step. But in all seriousness, it's a wonderful organisation. It's got an outstanding CEO in Steve Chu. Yeah. And the people on the board understand the issues that the game is confronted with and are working incredibly hard with management to try and find resolutions to them because, you know, rugby's in trouble. We're not getting the patrons along. We haven't got enough dollars to do the game, to stay ahead of the game, which is what we need to do. We need to double our revenues. And those sorts of challenges that I relish, and I think that's probably why they've put me on the board.
I found a little one, and I was surprised. Change the New Zealand flag. Are you still interested in changing the New Zealand flag? Because you were leading that process. No,
I wasn't leading it. It was led by Lloyd Morrison. But Lloyd rang me and said, "Look, Chris, how do you feel about it?" And I said, "I agree with you." So he said, "Well, look, would you go on our website?" He's now walked away. I mean, he's facing cancer as well, interesting enough. So he's got a very serious battle on his hand and has walked away from that. But I felt that we needed to state our own image. I'm not particularly a Republican, but I find our flag indistinguishable from the Australian flag. I mean, I can remember going out with a whole bunch of people to a restaurant in Vienna when I was living over there. And in this restaurant, you were asked to put your flags on the table. And we were a mixture of Australians and New Zealanders, and none of us actually knew what the New Zealand flag looked like compared with the Australians. And I mean, I'm ashamed of that now. But it doesn't identify our nationhood the way a black flag with a silver fern or something would do. So I thought we should change it.
If I had said to you, I need a brief answer, what has been your career highlight?
Oh, I think getting the Meistersingers, which is a 6-hour Wagnerian opera, on in Wellington at the festival and making a huge success of it. What
has been one of the true downers?
Getting sacked from Carmen.
Oh, I know what that's like. I know what getting sacked's like. Oh, I'm with you on this one.
That was interesting. I was chosen to sing Don José in a big outdoor production in London. And I was doing it with a bitch called Barbara Ewing, who was the Carmen.
Yes.
And she didn't like me, and she was the big star, and I wasn't. And so she arranged for me to be sacked. And interesting enough, there's a chorus about 500 people, and several of them were Antipodean, and they struck because they thought I was being treated unfairly. But that's without question
Do you know there's some similarities there? I changed the pitch to except in my case it was a bastard. However, hey, listen, it's been really great talking to you today, and I know we'll be watching you with interest, and you look fantastic.
Thanks,
I wish you all the best in your fight, and thank you for Canterbury for listening to One on One today.